I'll be going through some of the challenges in TB drug development, just one slide on that. Talk about some of our recent publications and presentations and the data that were presented there. Talk about the design of our ongoing phase 3 trial. Talk about our plans for responsible access following what we hope will be an approval in Europe. And then talk about our public health advocacy, awareness, and education program. And within that, trying to address, at least in part, what the CPTR invitation said we should address: what are we doing for patients? Okay, so here I work for a Japanese company, Otsuka, and here we are trying to summit Mount Fuji. And the primary point here is that as time has gone along, or to back up a little bit, that as all of our current regimens were tested and approved, it was very early on. It was prior to a lot of the current requirements for drug development. A lot of the studies even done before the ICH-GCP guidelines were in place. I'm not, that none of this is bad. All of this helps demonstrate, efficacy and particularly safety of the drug, but it's just getting increasingly complex to develop and get approval for a new drug. With the implementation of ICH-GCP, since then, there have been requirements for doing drug-drug interaction studies, particularly looking at interactions with CYP enzymes. There are now requirements for thorough QT studies. And one of the things we're running into now are questions about conducting transporter studies. We had a presentation yesterday about physiological-based PK models. And while they may be an informative tool to help us select regimens, it's going to just be one, Mount Fuji is just going to go up a little bit higher, and it's going to become more and more difficult to reach the summit. Here, very briefly, before I talk about some of the publications and presentations, is an overview of our study program and some confusions about it. I hope, yes, it does. So the foundational study is Trial 204, which is a randomized controlled trial. This is the one that was reported in the New England Journal of Medicine, and where we randomized patients to receive an optimized background regimen constructed according to WHO guidelines. And then they received either one of 2 doses of delamanid on a BID basis, and the laser's given out again. And they were treated for 2 months, and then there was a 1-month follow-up period to confirm sputum culture conversion. The next bar in yellow was an 6-month treatment extension program. Most of the patients pretty much rolled over straight from 204 into the 6-month treatment trial. However, in some of the countries, we had significant regulatory delays, and so there was actually staggered entry into that 6-month open label exposure, thus the shading of the yellow being most intense at the beginning. And then all of this was tied together in an observational program where we followed or attempted to follow patients for the 24 months and get data from their routine treatment, which with most of our sites being very high-level GLC sites, was actually quite good data and quite complete on sputum culture conversion, some information on adverse events, but particularly on final treatment outcomes. So moving along, looking at the short-term efficacy, as mentioned, the New England Journal of Medicine had a publication on our results from Trial 204. My eyes are failing me in going at this angle, but suffice it to say is that we had a slightly better than 50% improvement in sputum culture conversion at 2 months compared to those who were in the placebo group. And also, if you looked at it at a time to conversion analysis, the time to conversion was significantly better on the sputum culture conversion for those who were receiving delamanid. So then with the long-term efficacy, I really need to get glasses, I guess. Which was recently published in the ERJ, actually just came out last Thursday. It's available as an online publication. That reports the results of the combined analysis of the trials 204, 208, and 116. and looking primarily first at the proportion that had favorable outcomes as assessed by the investigator using the standard WHO assessment of final treatment outcomes. It was 74% in those who received delaminid for greater than or equal to 6 months, and it was only 55% in those who received 2 months or less of delaminid. I think, this result up here with a more rapid sputum culture conversion, I expected. This result here with the better long-term treatment outcomes, I expected. I did not expect what we observed in terms of the mortality rates in patients, and with a 1%, I think it says 1% mortality, and I think that's what I remember, in patients receiving delaminid for greater than or equal to 6 months, compared to an 8% mortality in those who received delaminid for 2 months or less. The bottom line, and I'm really, just reporting that in the long-term follow-up analysis, we had 421 patients out of the 481 patients that were randomized, followed for the full 24 months, which is 87.5% follow-up. Again, looking at the safety outcomes, that most of the AEs were graded mild to moderate, and were relatively evenly balanced among the delaminid and the placebo groups in the 2-month randomized controlled trial. For those who have more interest in the safety profiles, as an online supplement to the New England Journal of Medicine, we have a number of summary tables related to adverse events and safety outcomes. And we were also asked, and we agreed to provide, a complete listing of every adverse event that occurred by regimen. And I think it's like 28 pages of PDF going on, and it's really not very interesting. But it's there if you are interested. The one adverse event, or one class of adverse events that we saw that was different in the delaminid group compared to the placebo group was a higher incidence of QTCF prolongation. However, that did not result in any clinical manifestations, even though we had the higher percentage. And then also 2 other presentations that have been recently made, one at the International AIDS Conference and the other at ICAC, just occurred, were on DDI studies that we've conducted with antiretroviral drugs. And the bottom line is that there are no significant interactions between delaminid and any of those 3 antiretroviral drugs, which has given us the confidence to go forward and enroll HIV co-infected individuals in our current study. That study design is very similar to the 204 design in terms of entry criteria. We're recruiting patients who are believed to have MDR-TB, confirmed either by a rapid test or a recent culture showing multiple drug-resistant TB. In this case, we're randomizing to either receive delaminid, 200 milligrams given BID for the first 2 months and QD for the second 4 months, or placebo, plus an optimized background regimen. And we're randomizing 2 to 1 to the delaminid group to build our experience with delaminid. And so, as I said, during the first 2 months, it's given as a BID regimen, and for the 4 months, it's given on a QD basis. We'll then be following the patients for another 24 months after conclusion of the delaminid therapy. One of the other, we'll have co-primary endpoints of sputum culture conversion proportion at 2 months, so that we can compare back against the results in the 204 trial, and then also time to sputum culture conversion over the 6 months. We're planning to randomize a total of 400 patients who are sputum culture positive for MDR-TB at the beginning, and that's so that we have, as Crispin just mentioned, an MITT population of about, we estimate that will yield at least 300 patients going forward. As I mentioned, we will be enrolling HIV positive patients. All of those will be enrolled at sites in South Africa. And we will be having additional follow-up and hospitalization requirements for those patients. Let's see the co-primary endpoints. And we are currently enrolling in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Peru, the Philippines, and South Africa, and we hope to be adding Moldova and India within the next few months, certainly by January of next year. I mentioned the Responsible Access Program. This is a program that is being designed by and will be managed out of our offices in Munich. And Martin Pan is here, and he's been very actively involved in this. And so if you have detailed questions, you might try and catch him. But it has three basic components. One is professional education, another having a comprehensive registry, and then the third point, having a strict distribution. Oops, didn't want to do that. Strict distribution control. So with the medical education, this will be outreach to physicians to provide them with, physicians and patients, to provide them with information about delaminid, and also focusing on diagnosis, what they should be looking for in terms of drug susceptibility, testing, companion drugs that they should be looking at. And another thing about this is I think this is supposed to be SAEs, so timely and accurate SAE reporting, which is extremely important for us as an industry with a new drug. The regulators want to know a lot about what's going on during the first doses that are coming out. We'll be also asking them, or trying to get background information on the development of drug resistance. That would come at least in part from the comprehensive registry. We're targeting a very high coverage of patients who will be receiving delaminid to be a participant in this registry, which would cover them throughout their treatment program and for a follow-up period thereafter. And then the strict distribution and control, that kind of feeds back into the professional education, so that there will be a single point, including an online web-based tool that institutions or physicians can use to request delaminid for a patient. And there will be brief questions about the characteristics of the patient, and if they don't kind of seem to fit the appropriate use of delaminid, a medical educator would then reach out to them and inquire more and see if this delaminid is really something that should be used in this particular case. The next three slides really deal with our commitment to patients, and also are really run more out of our Otska, Geneva office. And we have two people from there, Davide Monacero and also Eric Adams, who was previously with FIND, but just started with us this week. And so we recognizing that it's not just the new compound, but it's fitting into the entire treatment process. We're supporting development of approaches to providing excellence in TB case management. Part of that is through involvement with a wide range of stakeholders in a program in Moldova to reshape their TB program. And it has a number of the features for those who were here at the diagnostics program, looking at triage of patients and using rapid diagnostics to get patients either down a drug-sensitive TB stream or a drug-resistant TB stream, and then how do you rationally, intelligently design regimens for patients in a very rapid and efficient manner. And so, again, we're participating in this program with one of the districts in Moldova, again, as part of a broad range of collaborators in that project. And one of the questions was, what are we doing to impact on people? And so this is just simply one story of one patient. It could be the story of many different patients, and I'm sure that those of you who've been working in the field are familiar with stories like Mildred's. But she had been under treatment for 10 years. She had MDR-TB. We encountered her through our clinical trials, learned of her story and the background that way. She was successfully treated and has been living TB-free now. She works at the Lung Center of the Philippines, counseling patients who have TB themselves and helping them get through their treatment. And she's also been a very active advocate and worked with some WHO and other international programs as a patient representative, patient advocate. To present some of the stories like Mildred's, we in collaboration with the European Respiratory Society, we developed this magazine which presents a series of vignettes, stories, commentary, background from clinicians, but mostly to present the patient perspective. We have copies available out in the forum on the registration desk for those who haven't seen it. It's also available online through the, I think it's the European Respiratory Society site has it available. We're considering, again, working with ERS to do a second edition at some point in the future, focusing in on different countries. So in quick summary, Otsuka, has had a long TB program with significant investments in developing a new treatment for TB. But as I said, I think we're learning and we're recognizing that developing a new compound, hopefully eventually recognized as a new drug, is only the first step in a comprehensive disease management package that's really needed to fight back against TB. And that it requires developments in a number of areas, including diagnostics, pediatrics, and public health interventions. And that we are actively collaborating, again, and a lot of our collaborations through our office in Geneva with a number of global stakeholders to try and achieve this goal. So, thank you very much.